So let's look at long division and synthetic division as a review for your quiz tomorrow. The first step in solving this problem is we have to first put it into standard form. So when I'm putting this into standard form, I need to make sure that I look at the highest exponent and work my way down. So I'm going to start with 9x cubed minus 18x squared minus 16x plus 32 and divided by x minus 2. I also need to make sure that whatever I'm dividing it by is also in standard form. And since it is, we can start looking at our problem. So what I want to do is I want to take whatever's divided by outside the division bar and put it inside. The first thing I want to look at are my first two terms. How do we get from x to 9x cubed? Another way to look at it, how many times does x go into 9x cubed? The answer to both of those questions is 9x squared. And I'm going to write it above my square term. Now I need to take 9 and multiply it by x minus 2. When I do that, I write it under their respective terms. Once I multiply those two things, I want to subtract them down. Now if you notice, they're both the same. 9x cubed minus 18x squared minus 9x cubed minus 18x squared is going to give you 0 for both of them. Since it's 0 for both of them, I'm going to bring both other terms down, which is negative 16x plus 32. Same process. How do I get from x to negative 16x? The answer to that question is multiplying it by negative 16. Once I multiply it, once again, I'll see that I have the same two things, negative 16x plus 32. When you subtract two things that are the same, you're going to get 0. Now I have a remainder of 0, so all I do is take what's on top of my division bar and write it out. 9x squared minus 16 is my answer. Let's look at the same problem now, but now let's use synthetic division. So the steps are the same. I have to make sure that it's in standard form. So I take my standard form coefficients, I write those inside the synthetic bar, then I take x minus 2, set it equal to 0, and that's how I get the 2 on the outside. Bring down your 9, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. And as you see, we still get a remainder of 0. Now remember, when I start my answer, I have to start at 1 degree down from the original. So if I started with 9x cubed, I have to start with 9x squared. And I get my answer of 9x squared minus 16. Synthetic division, remember, you bring the first number down, you multiply it, you always add what's on the inside, multiply what's on the outside. Let's look at a different type of problem when my coefficient in front of my x is a number other than 1. In this case, 4x plus 5. Now you can still do synthetic division, so my first step is to make sure I put the coefficients. So 4, negative 7, negative 11, and 5. Now, one way you can do this problem is you set 4x plus 5 equal to 0, and you solve for x being negative 5 over 4. Now you can use that number on the outside and follow the same process. So if I multiply negative 5 over 4 by 4, I get negative 5. I add those two things and I continue my process as normal. The one difference about this problem is when you get to the end, remember, we write our equation 1 degree less than what we started, so I'm going to start with 4x squared. If you notice, we can factor a 4 out of this. So that's what I need to do to get my final answer. So my final answer will be 4 times x squared minus 3x plus 1. Now let's look at the same problem, but a different way to do it. Okay. Now the last time what we worked was we solved for x completely. And we got our x on the outside to be negative 5 over 4. This time, the only one I'm going to move is the 5. So since it's plus 5, when I move it, it'll become negative 5. So all I'm going to use is negative 5 on the outside. The difference between this problem and the last is when I bring my problem down, I have to take whatever's in front of x, which is 4, looking at the 4x plus 5, and I have to divide it by 4. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. Now I do my same process. Negative 5 times 1 is negative 5. I add those two things, and I get negative 12. Same step. I have to divide it by the 4 from the 4x plus 5. Multiply it by negative 5. That gives me 15. Negative 11 plus 15 is 4. Divide it by 4. Same process. Now if you look at it, the only difference between this problem and the last one is that we do not have to factor at the end. We get the same answer, x squared minus 3x plus 1, but we don't have to factor the 4. So essentially it's two ways to do the same problem. The first one is you solve completely for x, and we got negative 5 over 4. This way we only get negative 5, and we just divide everything by the 4 with the x before we multiply.